They call them the invisible tools, software and services so quiet, so precise they could watch a life unfold through a screen. Every keystroke, every password, every private file. For years those tools lived in the shadows, sold in closed forums and rented by criminals who treated espionage like a business. Tonight we pull back the curtain. We tell the story of the digital forensic spy tools hackers use. And we trace the thread from infection to exposure, from secret to arrest. It begins with a call in the middle of the night. A security analyst had noticed a small, odd pattern on a corporate network. A legitimate laptop, behaving normally, suddenly sending tiny encrypted packets to an overseas address. Nothing large, no obvious exfiltration. Just a whisper of traffic at odd hours. The analysts labeled it suspicious and set a watch. 2 days later the company's finance officer received a convincing email, logged into the fake portal, and initiated a wire transfer. $500,000 vanished. That single incident was a doorway. It opened into an ecosystem, a catalog of spy tools that let attackers hide, persist, and move inside networks without detection. At first, investigators thought these were one-off tools, custom-built by a lone genius. As they peeled back layers, it became clear the hacker toolkit had matured into an industry. It wasn't only about malware that stole files, it was about suites of capabilities designed for secrecy. Remote access that looked like routine traffic, credential harvesters that blended into background noise, screen recorders that captured every form you ever filled, microphone hijackers that listened for personal verification codes, and modular frameworks that let criminals swap features like apps in a store. Understanding the tools means understanding the trade-offs hackers make between stealth and reward. The most dangerous tools aren't the flashiest ones. They are the smallest. Components that install quietly, that survive reboots, that piggyback on legitimate software updates and hide behind digital certificates. A hidden plugin in an enterprise app. An add-on that looks like a trusted service. A tiny script that gathers typing patterns and sends back snippets of session data. Those are the things that let an attacker watch a target for weeks, learning behavior, mapping routines, and striking when the timing is perfect. At the center of these campaigns are 3 capabilities that enable modern digital espionage: persistence, concealment, and control. Persistence means staying in a system despite reboots and defenses. Concealment means blending in, using encryption and mimicry so that malicious traffic looks like normal cloud syncs. Control means the ability to remotely manipulate a machine or user, open files, simulate keystrokes, enable cameras and microphones. When these 3 are combined, a hacker has a full surveillance platform inside your device. One of the market's most lucrative offers was command and control as a service, an infrastructure that handled the communications between infected machines and the attacker. With a subscription, a criminal could deploy malware and rely on the C2 to manage infected devices, issue commands, and receive stolen data. Operators paid for dashboards that displayed live victims, geographic maps, and automated exfiltration pipelines. This is how relatively inexperienced actors scaled into high-impact campaigns, by renting the orchestration and focusing only on social engineering and monetization. Social engineering is the grease that makes all the gears move. No matter how sophisticated the toolset, it still needs a way in. Phishing remained the chief entry vector, but it evolved. Attackers combined OSINT, open-source intelligence, with subtle personalization. They harvested bits of public life. A new hire announcement, a charitable donation, a recently attended conference. Messages no longer read like spam but like a colleague checking in. They arrived at just the right moment the victim had to act. These emails carried benign-looking documents with hidden payloads, or links to pages that mimicked a corporate login so perfectly the trained eye slipped. Once inside, forensic-grade spyware did the watching. These tools were not crude keystroke loggers. They were full-featured surveillance suites, file system monitors that silently copied documents as they were opened, API hooks that intercepted tokens and session cookies, screen capture modules that rendered entire workflows into compressed image streams, and audio capture that recorded 2-factor authentication codes read aloud during calls. They recorded not just data, but context. Who the victim emailed, which vendors they trusted, which accounts had high-value privileges. One of the most unnerving aspects investigators discovered was the use of legitimate system features as covert channels. A stock command used by management software, a legitimate cloud backup API, a CDN, content delivery network, that relayed packets in ways defenders assumed were safe. Attackers used these channels to tunnel stolen data, then split it into shards and hide pieces across multiple third-party hosts. This technique deliberately turned the convenience of modern cloud infrastructure into a cloak for theft. For decades, cyber defenses measured success by signature detection, recognizing known malware patterns and blocking them. But the new generation of spy tools deliberately avoided signatures. They were modular, script-driven, and often built from legitimate components repurposed. Instead of shipping a monolithic binary, attackers used sequences of benign-looking scripts executed in memory, leaving minimal footprint on disk. The result: by the time a defender looked at a device, logs showed only normal app behavior and encrypted traffic to a reputable cloud provider. To catch them, defenders had to shift focus, not only on what software ran but how it behaved. Behavioral analytics became the new frontline. Analysts watched for temporal oddities, accounts used at strange hours, patterns of file access that didn't match user roles, tiny transfers to odd payees. Network telemetry had to be read differently, not for signatures but for subtle deviations. And yet, even with this shift, the tradecraft of the attackers matured. They engineered their activity to mimic human rhythms. Tiny mouse movements, simulated typing speeds, scheduled actions to match the target's time zone. It was a game of patience and mimicry. So how were these tools ultimately exposed? How did investigators turn the tide against an invisible enemy? The answer lies in persistence of a different kind. The meticulous collection and cross-correlation of evidence across victims, and the willingness of analysts to look for the pattern where others saw only isolated incidents. The breakthrough often came from places the attackers didn't expect. Small mistakes, sloppy reuse of infrastructure, leaked bragging in a closed forum. In one high-profile case, a misconfigured server meant one command and control instance responded to HTTP requests without proper authentication. A security researcher noticed the open endpoint while crawling for vulnerabilities and reported it. That single misconfiguration allowed investigators to capture command logs and decode parts of the attacker's control protocol. From there, they reverse-engineered the C2 and found multiple campaign identifiers, victims, and even financial transaction trails. Financial tracing played a crucial role. Even when attackers laundered funds through mixers and crypto tumblers, blockchain analysis could reveal patterns. Addresses that correlated to exchange deposits, clusters of wallets that showed the same withdrawal schedule, and transactions that hinted at cash-outs. Cooperation with exchanges and payment processors was decisive. Once investigators identified accounts receiving laundered proceeds, they obtained legal orders to freeze assets, trace KYC, know your customer identities, and map networks of mule accounts. For crimes that crossed borders, international law enforcement task forces shared intelligence, coordinated takedowns, and synchronized arrests. Human intelligence mattered too. Undercover operations, informants, and interviews with arrested low-tier participants revealed the operational playbook. Many operators purchased off-the-shelf toolkits and subcontracted parts of the workflow. They did not always understand the full stack. They were small contractors in a larger supply chain. When investigators offered bargains to these lower-level actors, details emerged. How initial access was bought, which forum vendors sold specific plugins, and which payment processors were used to cash out proceeds. Those confessions stitched together an otherwise invisible supply chain. Forensic artifacts sometimes betrayed the attacker's development environment. Temporary debug logs, leftover test certificates, or even a reused username across a criminal forum pointed back to identities that investigators could link to real-world accounts. The hacker's world was global, and mistakes were human. A VPN that leaked a real IP for an hour, an email address used repeatedly, a username reused for bragging on multiple platforms. Those tiny threads were all investigators needed. One dramatic operation exposed the reach of these spy tools. Law enforcement, following a chain of signals, performed a synchronized takedown of multiple C2 servers. They obtained court orders, coordinated with hosting providers, and seized infrastructure before the attackers could notice. With control of the C2, investigators could see live infections and collect forensically sound snapshots. Those images provided the smoking gun, identical implant signatures across victims, shared encryption keys, and a set of modules that matched marketplace listings. The data allowed a scale of attribution that isolated not just tools but people. The arrests that followed shocked markets. Not every operator supporting the toolkit was a mastermind. Many were technicians and money mules. But the takedowns revealed a clear supply chain. Developers who produced modular surveillance kits, resellers who packaged them with user-friendly interfaces, and buyers who deployed them opportunistically. The transformation of espionage into a commercial product was now undeniable. Yet, for every takedown, another toolkit appeared. The market adapted. Code was refactored, infrastructure moved to new providers, and new obfuscation techniques were introduced. The cat-and-mouse game didn't end with arrests. But the sting operations had consequence. They raised the cost of doing business for criminals, forcing them to be more cautious, more expensive to operate, and more likely to slip up. There was a human side to the story that often got lost in the technical postmortems. Victims faced recovery that was more than financial. Businesses struggled with lost client trust, regulatory consequences, and the complex work of remediation. Individuals faced identity theft, long disputes with banks, and months of rebuilding their lives. Forensic investigators carried the burden of piecing lives back together while defending against a relentless tide of new attacks. The lessons that emerged from these cases were practical and profound. Prevention is both technical and cultural. Technical measures matter. Timely patching, robust authentication, least privilege access controls, endpoint detection and response systems that watch behavior rather than signatures, and network segmentation that limits lateral movement. But equally important is the human element. Training people to recognize social engineering, testing phishing resilience regularly, and building incident response plans that can contain an infection before it becomes a theft. There are also legal and policy lessons. Public-private partnerships were decisive. Where exchanges, cloud providers, and banks cooperated with law enforcement, funds were recovered more often and arrests were faster. Countries that improved cross-border legal frameworks and prioritized cybercrime coordination saw better outcomes. The message was clear. Cybercrime is transnational. The response must be too. One of the most hopeful takeaways was the power of transparency. Companies that publicly shared indicators of compromise and infection tactics enabled others to defend more effectively. A shared defanged sample, a hash of a malicious binary, or an IOC list might seem small, but for defenders everywhere, those bits of data could block attacks and save millions. Open collaboration between private researchers and law enforcement created a multiplier effect that was difficult for attackers to counter. So what does the future hold? Spy tools will keep evolving. The line between commercial surveillance tools, legitimate remote management software, and criminal implants will blur. AI capabilities will bring new tools that can sift data at scale, craft more believable social engineering, and automate evasion. The defender's arsenal will have to adapt. More automation in detection, better threat hunting, and improved international cooperation. But the story ends on a critical human note. Tools don't act on their own. They are wielded by people. When mistakes are made, a misconfigured server, a reused credential, a boast in a forum, those human errors create openings. Investigators will keep finding those openings because human error repeats itself in predictable ways. For every stealthy tool built to hide, there is a human trace that can expose it. This is the tale of the digital forensic spy tools hackers use. Not as a manual but as a warning. These tools are powerful but they are not invincible. They can be detected, dissected, and dismantled. They can be fought with patience, scale, collaboration, and a refusal to accept invisibility as a permanent advantage. If you're watching this, your role matters. Keep your systems patched. Use strong, unique authentication. Question unexpected requests. Encourage the organizations you rely on to share threat indicators. Support the specialists who hunt in the noise. Because every time we shine a light on these tools, the shadows shrink. They will keep inventing new ways to listen and to look. We will keep learning to hear the faintest whisper of their presence. And in that tireless work, the cross-checks, the collaborations, the arrests, and the public alerts, the balance tilts a little more in favor of defense. The spy tools are formidable, but so is our ability to expose them. And that is the story worth telling.